So the ACLU has released 4 myths about transgender people in school sports. This has kind of become a hot topic because a lot of people are talking about trans women beating women in their own game at every step of the way. And you have the ACLU and a bunch of these other progressive left-wing types that are going on Twitter and trying to change this narrative by just saying it's a myth. It's simply a myth. This is the first point that they were trying to make here. Myth number 1 is that they're saying that sex is binary, apparent at birth, and identifiable through singular biological characteristics. They're saying that that's the myth there, okay? And their statement below it that's supposedly supposed to debunk everything is, there is no way for our bodies to be. There's no one way. That's their statement there. Women, including women who are transgender, intersex, or disabled, have a range of different physical characteristics. Really? That's really interesting right there. It goes on to say biological sex and genders are not binaries. There are no set of hormone ranges, body parts, or chromosomes that all people of a particular sex or gender have. So this is kind of right on along the lines of this generalized everybody can be anything kind of idea. The problem is that these aren't really debunking these supposedly out there myths that they're talking about. These aren't debunking anything. This isn't even an argument against it. It's just saying, no, this is what it is. Not why those other things are wrong, but just, no, this is what it is. 20 years ago, we wouldn't have even been having this discussion. I mean, right there, you can pretty much call out all the transgenderism stuff right there. 20 years ago, this was not a topic of discussion. Why is that? And they'll say all the time, well, transgender people have been around forever, which of course is true, but the problem is that it hasn't been like this. Because now more and more, as people are getting more and more progressive, or at least a lot of these left-wing people are going further and further to the radical side of things, that's the only reason we're having these conversations. There was no way that we would have been having these conversations 20 years ago because it wasn't that important. They got by then, you would think they'd be able to get by now, but of course, we can't leave it at that. This, on its face, is science denial. I don't know how they call themselves a party of science when there is no scientific proof that men can be women and women can be men. There's zero evidence out there for that besides their feelings. When men and women do have different body parts and different chromosomes, saying anything else outside of that is false. You have to prove your case. You can't call something a myth that has been proven scientifically, not only in humans, but in the animal kingdom, through everything that we know. You can't just call that a myth because you feel like it. You have to actually debunk this. You can't just say, this is our alternative way of thinking, which is just right because we said it's right. Absolutely ridiculous. Second myth, trans athletes' physiological characteristics provide an unfair advantage over cis athletes. That's what they're saying is the myth. Their statement to this is trans athletes vary in athletic ability, just like cisgender athletes. Obviously they do. Nobody is making that assumption, and neither does that statement that you made there. It says in many states, the very same cis girl who have claimed that trans athletes have an unfair advantage have consistently performed as well as or better than transgender competitors. Show me the stats on that. Show me the stats on that. Because what we've seen so far is women getting legitimately hurt in these sports because they're competing with people that are way out of or way outside or above their actual physical ability. If this was true, why are there groups popping up all over the United States that are advocating to allow only biological women in women's sports? Why is it that we're seeing competition after competition where a trans athlete just jumps to the number 1 out of nowhere? Why do you think that's happening? Obviously, it's not 100% of the case that, trans athletes are all going to be always better. That's not exactly what we're talking about here. There's no 100% anything really in this world. But what we are saying is that the vast majority of them will have a much easier time outperforming women in that kind of regard. And how long do you think it's going to be before men start purposefully turning into transgender women just so they can win the titles easier? I mean, granted, that's a crazy move to do that, but people will do it. People will do it. It doesn't matter. And they'll be heralded as the best of the best, and no one can go against them whatsoever. So myth number 3. They're saying the myth is the participation of trans athletes hurts cis women. They're saying that's the myth. And their statement to that is, excluding women who are trans hurts all women. Okay, let's see how they explain this one. It invites gender policing that could subject any woman to invasive tests or accusations of being too masculine or too good at their sport to be a real woman. No, that's not what that is. How does that make any sense? Oh, you're too good as a woman at this sport, so therefore what? You're not allowed to compete? What? No. This statement comes along with the assumption that if a man chooses to be a woman, that all of a sudden he's a woman. Like, you can't go to that length and make this statement true. If a woman's extremely good at what she does, guess what? We can identify her by body parts, by chromosomes, by the way that we've identified anyone else and everyone else in society. That's how you do that. You can't say it hurts all women because your definition of women includes trans women. It's just completely backwards thinking entirely. Remember, they don't even let normal athletes use drugs and performance-enhancing drugs in the normal kind of activities with sports. So why in the world would they want somebody that's transgender that is taking testosterone, is taking all of these extra things and other hormones? Why would they want that to be the case? Why is that all of a sudden allowed? They won't let women take testosterone or men take more testosterone. They won't allow that to happen because it's considered as cheating. But for some reason, when they're trans, all the rules go out the window. And the last myth that they have on here is that trans students need separate teams. And this one, I don't even think a lot of people are making this argument anymore, but their point behind this, what they're saying it should be, is that trans people, like all people, may experience detrimental effects to their physical and emotional well-being when they're pushed out of affirming spaces and communities. Listen, everybody who's ever lived has been pushed out of some kind of community before. That may have been a group of friends in high school or a group of like the kind of the cliques you had in high school that you weren't able to be a part of. That may have been the sports team that you weren't good enough to join. That may be the principal position in an orchestra that you weren't good enough to audition for. But regardless of what it is, there's always going to be things that you do in life that you are unable to qualify for or be a part of it. Why is it that the second that it's involving trans people and sports, that all of a sudden they need affirmation? How is this not just a weird version of a participation trophy? Everybody gets an award. Why? Because you're trans. That's the only way that they're looking at this. They go on to say efforts to exclude subsets of girls from sports can undermine team unity. The youth derive the most benefits from athletics when they are exposed to caring environments, when teammates are supported by each other and by coaches. So first of all, first statement of this is that them saying that their efforts to exclude subsets of girls from sports can undermine team unity. How? I'll tell you what undermines team unity: having to go to a locker room with somebody that has an entirely different body part than yours. Right there, you're going to have some issues. And nobody seems to have figured out exactly what they're going to do about that. Pretty sure their parents don't want that to be the case either. And then they're saying, well, they just derive the most benefits from these diverse environments. We've seen left-wing people say this before, but there's no proof of that being the case. There is no actual science or scientific study behind that actually being true. People are more productive when there's diversity of thought, not when there's diversity of things that you have nothing to do with. But yet that's the way that they're going to push this. You just watched a clip from The William Hall Show. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.